The memory is sharpened by shame, a public humiliation that still makes my stomach twist, years after I left London. If I close my eyes, I see the flickering overhead lights in the church hall, the windows sweating with the warmth of massed bodies, and that familiar musty odor. Boiled tea, shoes on linoleum caught under my tongue. My hands had felt sticky even before I was called to stand in front of everyone. I was 17. The youth group meeting had ended, and Mr. Darrow, in his great effort to guide me, decided it was time for the whole congregation to hear about my ridiculous dream. I remember Ma, sitting rigid in the third row, fingers laced so tight her knuckles turned white. I tried to catch her eye, told myself she'd step in, say something, defend me, but she stared at her knees. Mr. Darrow's voice boomed, carrying easily in the confined space. "Eddie, let's have you up here. Tell us all what it is you want to do with your life." I stumbled to the front. There, with everyone's eyes on me, Angela Harris's curious, Tom Ricketts narrowed to mean little slits, Mrs. Chowdhury's lips pressed tight, I felt myself shrink. Some nights, I still hear the scrape of my shoes on that old battered floor. I knew what he wanted. He'd overheard me talking to my mate Sam about the game I was designing on my old PC. In my head, it was more than just code and pixels. It was a world I could shape with my hands. A place where my ideas weren't silly, were Darrow, but from the rows behind. Tom Ricketts snorted, and someone mimicked the sound of video game bleeps. Even my cousin Nadia buried her face to hide a grin. "A game developer," Mr. Darrow declared, as if presenting evidence in court. "You want to waste your life on those little screens? Play pretend instead of training for a decent job? Your poor mother works split shifts, and this is what you want?" Ma just stared at her lap. I felt my cheeks burn, the back of my throat thickening with something part shame, part protest. "And what's wrong with becoming an electrician, like your uncle?" Mr. Darrow pressed on. "Or a plumber, or a proper tradesman?" It came out pitiful, a miserable croak. Mr. Darrow shook his head as if the case was closed. "Dreamers are a dime a dozen. This community needs workers. Think about that." The room quieted, the message absorbed. "A fool's errand," I heard someone mutter. "They let me sit down then." My knees trembled so hard that I nearly missed the chair. Afterward, Ma squeezed my shoulder, a short, awkward touch. Later, in the kitchen, she found her voice. "I just want you to have security, Eddie," she whispered, pulling mugs from the drying rack. "That's all." I nodded, not trusting myself to answer. After that night, the jokes started. At school, on the estate, in the line at the newsagents. Tom Ricketts stuck Post-it notes on my locker. Level 1, failure. Angela told her friends I was a right weirdo. Even the uncles at family dinners would snicker, asking when I'd make them a Mario mop or Tetris tea. But in the quiet hours, when everyone else was asleep or gone, I turned on my battered PC, the fan coughing softly, and dove back into the world I was building. The game had no name then, just rooms threaded with possibilities. Sometimes I heard the echo of laughter as I coded, but anger burned behind my ribs, fueling every keystroke. If they wanted me to give up, they'd have to drag me from the keyboard. I saved up from odd jobs, sweeping at Patel's shop, unloading flowers at the market, scrimped enough for a second-hand graphics tablet, and watched hours of YouTube tutorials. My world grew. Haunted castles, sly foxes in alleyways, rivers that glimmered at dusk. I found online forums where nobody jeered at me or told me to be practical, and even made a friend, Linda from Minnesota, who helped me debug my clunky combat system. Still, every day in London felt like running on grit. Ma would leave job ads on my desk, trainee plumber needed, warehouse assistant. each a silent plea to be someone else. I couldn't go anywhere without running into someone from the estate, someone who knew my story. After a while, I stopped leaving my room unless I had to. When I finished the first build of my game, I submitted it to a tiny indie showcase in Brighton. More hope than strategy. Almost didn't go, thinking it'd be better to keep my failure private, but Linda messaged me, "Do it scared." So I packed my USB stick, scraped train fare from a month's wages, and faced the city full of strangers, none of whom cared who I was back home. It was pouring in Brighton, the afternoon gray and raw. The conference center smelled of coffee and new computers. I sat up at my assigned table, hands shaking as I loaded my game. I watched people, not kids, but adults, wander over. Play? A month later, I had my first email from a publisher. They wanted to fund development, advance, marketing, the works. I stared at the screen so long, Ma asked if I'd gone catatonic. I tried to explain. She wiped her hands, looked at the number in the email, and frowned. 15,000 just to finish it? Is that safe? But her voice wavered, uncertain. I left for Manchester 3 weeks later, my entire world in a suitcase. The landlord handed me the keys to my rented flat, a poky place with damp in the corners, but I barely cared. When the bugs got too thick, when my hands cramped from drawing, when I doubted myself, I remembered the church hall laughter, dismissals, the smothering sense of smallness. It took 2 more years. Funding nearly fell through twice. At one point, my bank account hovered at 0, and I called Ma in tears, unable to explain why coming home would be failing. She mailed a loaf of homemade bread and a jumper, her only way of saying she still believed in something. 2 months later, we got shortlisted for the BAFTA Game Awards. For the first time since that church hall, I let myself believe it was real. I called Ma. She cried, then asked if the BBC was coming round. I laughed, promising to come home soon. The first time I returned to London, the city felt smaller than I remembered, streets pressed close with the ghosts of old anxieties. Ma met me at Euston, fussing about my hair and the fact I looked thin enough to blow away. She'd moved flats, but the estate was the same. Kids on bikes, takeaway wrappers drifting along the curb, every brick carrying memories. She insisted I dress smart for Sunday. "It's the Harvest Festival," she said. "Everyone will be there." The church hall looked exactly the same green and white bunting, harsh fluorescent bulb humming overhead. I recognized most faces, older now, though their laughter hadn't mellowed. Tom Ricketts was there, hair thinning, cradling a baby. Mrs. Chowdhury smiled cautiously. I felt the urge to duck my head, find a chair in the back. We sang hymns. My voice, rusty, barely carried above the organ. At tea time, Angela Harris drifted over on kitten heels, mouth pursed. "Heard you move north, Eddie," she said. "Making robots or something?" Ma behind the table straightened up. "He's just come from Manchester, working in computers." Angela nodded, unimpressed. "All code and no fun, I bet." Before I could answer, Mr. Darrow loomed into view, larger than life. "Good to see you made it back from your adventures." He grinned. "Mum, But she nodded at the podium, a silent challenge. I couldn't make my feet move at first, but then something inside me rebelled. Call it defiance, call it pride. I walked up, the room blurring to faces, nervous laughter, and the ever-present burned coffee scent. I cleared my throat. Silence fell. For a moment I was 17 again, knees weak, words stuck. "I left London a while ago," I began, voice shaky but rising. "I wanted to make video games. Everyone thought it was a waste. But I was stubborn, or maybe just too in love with the idea of building something of my own." A few polite chuckles. In the corner, Tom Ricketts whispered to his mate, I worked odd jobs. I made a game. It's called Foxlight.